Keeper of the Lost Cities, Everblaze, Chapter 8. Why? It was a tiny word, much too small to hold the avalanche of emotions currently crashing through Sophie's head, but it was the only thing she could think of to say. Why what? Alden said after a second. I don't know, Sophie stood, needing to move, to try and figure out why part of her wanted to cry and the rest of her wanted to punch something really, really hard. I guess I don't understand why the council thinks Finton deserves to be healed, she admitted. I mean, you gave him a ton of chances to save himself, and he chose to have his mind broken instead. She should have felt horrible for saying that, but she'd seen Finton's memories. She'd watched his hunger for power cause the death of 5 other pyrokinetics. She had seen him illegally train an unregistered pyrokinetic to spark Everblaze, the same pyrokinetic who'd kidnapped her and Dex and started the fires that killed hundreds of innocent humans. She'd felt his fury towards the council and knew he would stop at nothing to take them down, even if it meant breaking her and Alden's sanity along with his, which he'd very nearly done. Alden sighed. I'm not convinced that anyone, even Finton, deserves to spend an eternity trapped in the madness of a broken mind. She reached for his hand, wondering how much he remembered about his own shattered days. I do understand why you're reluctant to heal Finton, though, he added quietly. And I hold many of these same reservations, but Finton has information that could lead us to the rebels. He managed to stop us from taking it during the memory break, but thanks to you, we have a second chance to learn who he's protecting. And you know better than anyone how important that information is. But the thought of entering Finton's mind again? I'll be with you the whole time, Alden promised. Sophie sank heavily into her chair. It just seems so unfair. Why does Finton get to be healed when Prentice is stuck with a broken mind? The only crime Prentice committed was protecting me. Shadows settled into Alden's features, making him look 20 years older. Believe me, no one is more aware of that than me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... I know you didn't. And you don't have to worry. I'm not feeling guilty. Well, not too guilty anyway. I'm simply frustrated, like you. In fact, I made the same point to Kenrick when he was here. But he explained to me that's the problem. Finton's easy. With or without his mind healed, he's guilty. And had he given us the information we needed in the first place, we still would have exiled him for his crimes. But Prentice is an entirely different situation. He's not necessarily guilty, but he's not exactly innocent. The Black Swan are still classified as rebels. Yes, some of the things they've done are good, but they've done them illegally, and that makes Prentice still technically a criminal. Essentially, Prentice is a lovely shade of gray, and the council only knows what to do with black and white. So they'll leave his mind broken forever? Nobody said forever, Sophie. But for now, when there's no obvious solution, the council has decided to give themselves time to think through all the possible options, until the best course of action becomes clearer. I don't think you understand how ill-equipped our world is for these kinds of issues. The council is facing dilemmas that have never been seen in all the thousands of years of our history. They've accepted that now it's time for a change, but they want to make sure it's the right change, and they need more information before they're willing to move forward. Information that Finton hopefully has. Will you help get it for them? I thought I didn't have a choice. It was an order, yes. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to make sure you're okay with this. You're a very talented girl. And as a result, you've had tremendous responsibilities heaped on your shoulders. But you're also 13. If this is too much, I will go back to the council and make them reconsider. I already warned Kenrick, and he agreed. Sophie doubted Alden and Kenrick would be able to change their minds. The council seemed to be getting increasingly divided in their decisions concerning her, and it didn't matter. Much as she dreaded having to see Finton again, he really was her best chance at stopping her kidnappers. "I'll do the healing," she said, wishing her stomach didn't feel so squirmy as she said it. Alden smiled sadly. "You never cease to amaze me, Sophie. And I promise there will be a day when your life goes back to normal." Sophie wasn't sure she even knew what a normal life meant for an elf, but she hoped she'd get to find out someday. "So when am I supposed to heal him?" she asked. Kenrick said the council is still making the arrangements. Given what happened last time, they want to make sure they've considered every variable, so that there will be no other issues. Issues was putting it mildly. She'd never forget the searing pain when Finton burned her wrist to break their concentration, or finding Alden unconscious on the floor, with his head streaked with red. "It will be safe this time," Alden promised, and Sophie tried to believe him, but her legs were pretty shaky as she stood to leave. "Wait, wasn't there something you wanted to talk to me about?" Alden asked. "Oh, right." She couldn't believe she'd forgotten about Sylvanie. Sophie showed him the silver tracker, explaining where she'd found it and how Greyfell had known it was there. Alden's jaw clenched tighter with every word. "Well," he said after an endless stretch of silence, "I'm sure there's no reason to worry." Alden had said those words to her dozens of times since she'd met him, but she'd never believed them less. "Don't you think we should move Sylvanie somewhere secret?" she said. "Not that Jerk's not doing a good job. He's trying really hard. But the rebels still found a way in, just like they found a way into Havenfield that time we found the footprint. It might even be the same pyrokinetic who snuck in both places. Unless... Do you have those tracks? Do you think those tracks the goblins made outside the sanctuary were made by ogres?" "How did you know about that?" Alden asked. "Keith told me, and I saw the fluxers." Alden nodded and turned to pace, crossing the room 3 times before he said, "The thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to goblins, Sophie, is the fact that they tend to assume that ogres are behind everything. In fact, both species are always accusing the other of violating the treaties we've worked hard to put in place. So yes, the goblins on patrol discovered some strange tracks that definitely shouldn't have been there, which was why we investigated them so thoroughly. But Alvar found no proof that the tracks were connected to the ogres in any way, and neither did Lady Cadence." "Lady Cadence? My linguistics mentor?" Sophie interrupted. "Yes, she was living with the ogres before she was brought back to mentor you, remember?" "Yes, and she seemed to deeply resent Sophie for it." "Why did the council choose her to mentor me?" Sophie couldn't resist asking. "Because she's the most talented linguist in our world, and giving you the best possible training is far more important than her research into ogre technology. And it's good we have her back, because she was able to make those effluxers, which we added outside the sanctuary just to be safe. And speaking of safe," he held out his hand, "I'll need to keep the tracker, so that I can show it to the council." Sophie handed it over, happy to be rid of it. The last thing she wanted was to have the rebels know her every move, which made her wonder, why would the rebels even bother tracking Sylvanie? I mean, they already know she's in the sanctuary. Why risk getting caught just to have a monitor on her every move? That is what I intend to find out. He flashed his most confident smile, and Sophie did her best to accept it, but she still vowed to do everything she could on her own. "You going home?" Alden asked, as she had held her home crystal up to the light. "Yeah, if I'm not back by sunset, Sandor's gonna murder Keith." Alden glanced out the window where the last splashes of pink were fading into the purple twilight sky. "I guess I should warn Keith to flee for his life." Sandor was waiting outside Havenfield when Sophie arrived, and his glare told her he was very aware she'd missed her curfew. But all he said as he sheathed his long black sword and motioned for her to follow him inside was, "I'm glad you're safe." Sophie turned in the opposite direction. She knew the Black Swan wanted her to sit back and wait, but the rebels had just changed the game. "Where do you think you're going?" Sandor said, keeping pace with her as she made her way through the pastures. Her palms turned sweaty, as she pressed her thumbs against the sensor on the padlock of the cliffside gates. And the green flash seemed especially bright as it clicked open. Or maybe it was because the path beyond the gate looked so much darker than normal. "I demand to know what's going on," Sandor said, as he blocked her from heading down the stairs. She tried to push past him, but it was like slamming into a rough-skinned mountain. I just need to leave a note." "A note?" Sandor repeated. "Yeah." She reached into her pocket, tracing her fingers around the tiny green bottle she'd unearthed earlier. The Black Swan had sent her dozens of messages over the last few months. It was time to send one of her own.